Good afternoon, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining this virtual informal briefing. Thank you for being on time. We are affording ECOWAS a few minutes and then we will start. So thank you once again for your patience, and we should be starting in about 5 minutes at most. Thank you. Okay, so we have our ECOWAS representative, our second representative, Dr. Sani has joined us, and so I'm pleased to begin. Good afternoon once again, and welcome to this informal virtual briefing on Counter-IED Capability Maturity Assessment Tool. This is an informal briefing. We will start with a welcome remarks by ECOWAS, followed by a presentation of UNIDIR's IED tool. We'll have a presentation by UNMAS, and then a presentation from the Small Arms Survey. After the presentations, we'll have a panel discussion where the panel will be ready to answer any questions, comments, or additional information requests that participants may have. So this is briefly the outline for the event. And would like to request that you mute your microphones when you are not speaking, but turn on your videos if you are able to. And we just assure you that it's going to be a brief, and we hope that it will be an informative event as well. My name is Anna Mensah, and I'm an associate researcher at UNIDIR, and I'm happy to be your moderator for the event. Thank you very much. And at this stage, I pass on to Dr. Sani from ECOWAS for the welcome remarks. Thank you, and Dr. Sani, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. I bring to you greetings from ECOWAS Commission. Like we are all aware, the collaboration and the effective partnership that is currently between ECOWAS and UNIDIR is a commendable one. Our management is really fully in support of this collaboration because of the impact, the consistent impact that will be recorded over the years, based on the specific, activities and programs that we've been jointly conducting in our member states. The Counter-IED capability maturity model is actually an important self-assessment tool that is going to fully, support our member states. We know the nature and the extent of the threats that IEDs are posing to our communities, to our societies, and the increasing level of the use by miscreants, particularly in our region. So all efforts must be on deck to be able to see that we're able to prevent, and where possible, where incidences of IEDs happened, we need to really put effective mitigation measures, which I'm happy, the self-assessment tools are important mechanisms that will help our member states to fully and effectively also, control this menace. For us in ECOWAS, this is a joint effort between UNIDIR and ECOWAS. We have conceived the project together. We have also agreed on the key multi-level initiatives that we needed to take over the next 24 months. And therefore, it's important to stress that ECOWAS is fully in support of this process, and that we'll be able to see that the peace and security that we all crave for thrive in our region and beyond. For us in ECOWAS, we are seeing this tool as a very important, mechanism that will support, not only the arms control, non-proliferation, as well as disarmament measures that we already have in the region, but also to support, reinforcing the need for us to prevent, the illicit armed groups, particularly from having access, and for also the misuse. So I want to urge our member states that are on this call to actually fully participate and ask questions where possible, because over the next months we'll have to do the self-assessment exercise in our member states, particularly interested member states, so that we'll be able to see the gaps. We'll also be able to see the level of challenges, of IEDs in the various member states. It's important to articulate this assessment exercise in each of the member states, and also put it forward, because in the course of this project, we need to have also a high-level engagement with the high authorities in member states, so that this regional dialogue will help to actually secure the national ownerships at the highest level, so that we can effectively be able to address, the problems associated. So I wouldn't want to take too much of the time. I know our key experts are already in place. They will give us all the substance, and the nature, as well as the extent with which the tools can be used, and the need for member states to actually support the process. So once more, greetings from ECOWAS Commission, and to reinforce and to reiterate the fact that ECOWAS is fully in support of this initiative, and will continue to effectively collaborate with partners, our strategic partners like UNIDIR, to be able to accompany our member states, which is an obligation. Like, the Convention on Small Arms and Light Weapons in our region is a legally binding instrument. And it has also provision, that is, obligating member states to put in place, measures that will address, the issues of IEDs. So this is a timely intervention, and we are not only satisfied.
Hello, Dr. Sani. We may have experienced a connection problem. We are not able to hear you. So if you can hear us, can you restart or remute your microphone and open it again? We have missed you for a minute. Yes, Dr. Sani, can you hear us? We lost you for a minute.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, you have the floor to continue.
Oh, I was only concluding to say that, to reiterate the fact that ECOWAS is fully, in this process, and by extension, our member states. So this is what I will say finally, to wish us well. And I can see all my good friends around the call. So I look forward to the discussions over the next hour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sani. Thank you for ECOWAS's support and strong partnership on this joint effort. We would like to acknowledge once again the member states who have taken the time to join this call. Thank you, representative from Liberia. Thank you, representatives from Ghana and from Sierra Leone. We also like to acknowledge the partners, the UN partners, UNMAS, Geneva and UNMAS HQ, who have joined us on this call. And of course, our expert partner, SWAM Survey, in this project. Thank you all for your time. I'll now hand over to our UNIDIR expert, Mr. Alfredo Baldo, who will present UNIDIR's IED tool. Thank you, and over to Alfredo.
Thank you, Anna. First, just confirming that you can hear me. All right, and thank you, Dr. Sani, for the introduction. Erica, colleague, if you can project my PowerPoint, please, that would be great. All right, thank you. And my name is Alfredo Malaret. I'm a researcher at UNIDIR, and I want to take this opportunity to present a tool we developed to assist in designing counter-IED strategies. Just to be clear, our long-term goal in this effort is to work with partners to create a counter-IED sub-regional strategy in partnership with ECOWAS. However, as we understand it, the first step in this effort is to conduct national assessments in order to find shared challenges and opportunities using the same benchmark and the same metrics in a way that they are comparable. And this first step is what we want to discuss today. Before starting, I want to thank UNMAS for their presence in this briefing and sharing their expertise and support. It is not only a way to show how to turn research into action, but also a good example of the UN delivering as one. I also want to thank the Smolensk Survey for the specialized services, technical feedback in the development of this tool, and for working together in this sub-regional initiative to improve the well-being of communities affected by IEDs. Next slide, please. Just quickly, for those who are not well acquainted with UNIDIR, we are an autonomous institute within the UN. And the main point is that our goal is to assist the international community to develop the practical and innovative ideas needed to find solutions to critical security problems. And I want to emphasize two words, practical and innovative. And the way we approach our work, I call it solutions plus partnerships. We come up with practical and innovative ideas, and then we look for partnerships that we can maximize our work by doing it together. Next slide, please. Now, what is the Counter-IED Self-Assessment Tool, and why does it have such a long name? And this is a reason for my presentation today. And it comes from the General Assembly. We were requested to develop, and I paraphrase, a voluntary tool to assist states on IEDs. Pursuant to this request, with the support from the government of France, we developed an accessible, easy-to-use tool designed for states to self-identify challenges in preparedness to counter the threat posed by IEDs. In developing this tool, we have consulted a global network of stakeholders and experts, including 2 expert review meetings, distributing the draft to over 70 experts for feedback, and carrying out 2 pilot tests to ensure that the tool is fit for purpose. Needless to say that the main partners in providing feedback were, of course, UNMAS and the Smolensk Survey, who are present here today. So what are the next slide, please. So what are the ultimate objectives of the tool? Well, based on the gaps and challenges identified after conducting a self-assessment, the objective is to leverage this knowledge to enhance prevention and response strategies. It could also help define the priority of work and monitor progress, since you can repeat the assessment and compare against previous results. Next slide, please. Now, how is the tool organized? In a nutshell, components of Counter-IED are divided into 2 broad categories: upstream activities, those aimed at preventing IED events, and downstream activities, which are associated with a response to IED events, should this happen. So we're talking about left of the boom and right of the boom. Just one click, please. Yeah. The basic premise of the tool is that the more mature the prevention measures, the less response measures will be required. So prevention is more cost-effective than response. Next slide, please. Now let's get into the weeds of the tool. To discipline the range of all counter-IED activities possible, we have maintained the concept of upstream and downstream components. And this slide shows all the 16 activities outlined in the tool. You will see that not all the activities are focused directly on the IED event. This is because other measures, such as risk education, border controls, control on precursors, among others, are also important, but often overlooked. And that is why we have placed significant emphasis on the whole of government approach to countering IEDs. In the tool, the effort to assess these activities is structured around a capability maturity model, and hence the long name. Next slide, please. Now, I realize capability maturity model is a fancy name, but I think we can define it as a set of structure levels. That is all it is, levels or discipline, that describe how well the current practices can reliably produce required outcomes. The main benefits of using this discipline framework, capability maturity model, is that it provides a baseline, a benchmark for the basis of comparison, and it indicates critical gaps and areas where process improvements may be required. Next slide, please. This graph presents the 5 maturity levels utilized in a self-assessment tool to illustrate the range of results. For example, level 1, initial, indicates that the approach to countering IEDs is not well defined, and it is conducted by units responding with minimal training and equipment and not in accordance with a nationally defined policy. Or on the other end of the spectrum, level 5, optimizing, signals that the state has a fully functioning cohesive structures which can deal with a complete range of IED threats, and international cooperation is mature. Next slide, please. Now let's get into practice, how to use the tool. The most important step in using the tool is to assess each counter-IED activity identified in the model. So those 16 activities we saw earlier. The tool provides questions and guidance on assessing each activity against 5 different levels of maturity. This is key. We do not provide the correct answers. We provide questions for states to conduct the assessment. For example, an example of a question on risk education: are awareness messages updated as the threat posed by IED evolves? And after asking that question, the tool is followed by criteria to situate current practices in its corresponding level of maturity. So on IED risk awareness, after asking these relevant questions, the state can identify where are we in this spectrum? Are we 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Then after assessing each activity, we reach consolidated results for upstream and downstream components. Results can be used to establish a baseline of capabilities across the prevention and response cycle. Then prioritize efforts to improve capacity and maximize international cooperation and information sharing. In this last aspect, I would like to highlight the importance that the tool can have in aiding regional efforts to develop a coherent regional strategy against IEDs. To be clear, information gathered by the tool can be useful for states to improve national practices, but also to utilize in dialogue with regional partners to find the best cohesive regional strategy. And please note that the tool is voluntary and involves no reporting requirements unless you desire to do so. Next slide, please. How does the tool look in practice? Well, to facilitate self-assessment efforts, we developed a simple data visualization app based on Microsoft Excel, which I will explain in the following slides. The application uses a series of Excel tabs to enter data with 1 tab per counter-IED activity. So you will go tab by tab or counter-IED activity by counter-IED activity. The application also provides a mechanism to add free text to include open-ended comments of interest that may be acquired during assessments that are not included in the questions. And then 2 separate summary sheets, one for upstream and one for downstream components, will automatically display the consolidated results. Next slide, please. And this is how the results show up. The consolidated results use a radar type chart to provide a graphical representation of upstream and downstream maturity. An example of the results is shown on this slide. You can see that upstream counter-IED maturity level of this example is more mature in, for example, control of IED precursors, which is a full, or intelligence-led operations, which is fully mature, as opposed to national policy and regulations, that it's a 1. The table on the left, will also provide an automatic summary of the individual maturity levels for each counter-IED activity and an overall average for upstream and downstream components. One of the most interesting things about this app is that this is all automatized. So you just plug in the results after conducting a self-assessment, and the radar type chart appears, and so does the average results. And the output of this tool is just an indication of the maturity level. It is not set in stone, but it's also an indication of where you are at this moment after this self-assessment with the inputs that you provide. Next slide, please. And I've reached the end of my presentation, and I will be here for questions on how to use it. But I want to conclude with 4 key takeaway messages. First, this tool is a UNIDIR tool, but it is a product of a collaborative efforts. I already mentioned UNMAS, and Survey, who were key partners in developing this tool, but also many other UN partners as ODA and many independent experts. And this is important to highlight every time we speak about the tool, because it was designed as a collaborative effort and it should be used in a collaborative manner. Second, the data visualization apps facilitates the collection and display of results. We know that conducting self-assessment is hard, it's time consuming, it is difficult, and that's why we developed an app. So you can just plug in results and it gives you consolidated results in an easy to visualize manner. Third, a question that we get all the time, it is voluntary, and it's available in English, French, and Spanish for your language of preference, and it's also coming soon in Arabic. I will provide the link to the tool in the chat in a minute. And fourth, I encourage you to use the tool to improve preparedness and reach out to us and to this group of experts, to this informal group of experts, if you need any guidance or technical accompaniment in deploying it. We are a research institute, but we like to move from research to action. After conducting self-assessments, once we have several self-assessments, measure against the same benchmarks, we can develop strategies that are coherent at the regional level to maximize the impact. With that, I want to conclude my presentation and pass to our Master of Ceremony, Anna. My email is available, and I'll put the link to the tool in the chat in a minute. Thank you, and back to you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Alfredo, for that excellent presentation. I'm sure the member states and the participants here have some questions. And I'd like to encourage all to note down our questions and so that we can discuss them during the expert panel or the discussion session that will follow after all the presentations. Thank you once again, Alfredo. I'll now hand over to Mr. Alex Rebo from UNMAS to do the presentation on behalf of UNMAS. Thank you, and Alex, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anna, Alfredo, and Dr. Sani for the great introduction and the kind words. Please let me also share my screen for this presentation. And I hope you can see now. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Alex Rebo, and I'm working at the UNMAS headquarters in New York in the IED Threat Mitigation Advisory Team. On this next slide, you can see our presence in the current ECOWAS states. And I want to congratulate UNIDIR and ECOWAS in this initiative, how they more or less promote and start to implement the UNIDIR Self-Assessment Tool. And as we did here from UNHQ, and thank you, Alfredo, for the kind words in the development of the tool, I want to underline today that our programs in the field, in the ECOWAS countries, stand now ready to continue providing the support also to ECOWAS member states when they are using and implementing the tool and the model when it is requested. I think, as it was mentioned by Dr. Sani from ECOWAS at the beginning, it is really essential that this national ownership is driving this process. It has and it is supported, as we can see today, by ECOWAS, which is a really important initiative. But the different organizations that have been involved, like UNIDIR, Small Arms Survey, UNMAS, and many other entities and also UN organizations will follow the further implementation and provide support when necessary. On this next slide, you can see the United Nations IED Response Cycle. And this was built on the UNIDIR IED capability maturity model, and we added 3 categories. This was developed by a collaboration of 12 different UN entities that are working together in a UN whole-of-system approach to counter the threat from IEDs. And on this next slide, you can see how all of these different UN organizations are supporting the implementation or work in these different categories that are based on this tool. We have also an overview where you can more or less see how this tool is used by the different UN organizations, where they are active. And for sure, I highlight, you can see I'm with the UNMAS HQ, but our programs in the field are working on the implementation on the different operational and tactical levels. These are all the organizations that are part of this. And as the United Nations, I don't want to speak only for UNMAS. All of these different UN organizations provide their part in the implementation. And my important message today is to all the ECOWAS member states is, if there is any need, please, we can provide assistance in using the model, because it is very straightforward, but it requires some expertise to implement and assess. As Alfredo said, in the end, there should be answers to some questions. And these answers could also be that some actions are necessary. And you can pick yourself which is the right organization that suits best for you to help to do the self-assessment if needed, and also to implement the further actions that will be necessary. And this is already the end of my part of this presentation. Again, thank you very much. Congratulations for this initiative. And I really hope to see the use of this self-assessment tool and also answers to the questions that will be coming out of this self-assessment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that very succinct presentation. And thank you for the support that UNMAS is ready to provide to ECOWAS member states in using the IED self-assessment tool. Thank you once again. I'll now hand the floor to our colleague from the Small Arms Survey for their presentation as well. Mr. David Lockhead, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you to ECOWAS and Dr. Sani for the introductory remarks and for the excellent presentations. I'm here with my colleague, Elodie, also working on this IED project, which is funded by the German Federal Foreign Office. So just before I start the presentation, I'll just give a bit of background on the project, and then I'll jump right in. It's a bit heavy, and we'll have to speed through some of it, but it'll give you an idea of the scope of the research that we've been undertaking over the last 2 years in the ECOWAS region, and also a bit further into North Africa and other parts of the Sahel. So the project actually was launched on the back of another project which was run by the Small Arms Survey with ECOWAS member states, which was a 5-country survey of arms and ammunition, illicit arms and ammunition trafficking in the sub-region. And during the presentation of that research in Abidjan to the ECOWAS member states, the issue of IEDs started to come up. This was in 2018. And of course, the Small Arms Survey has a long track record of looking at diversion of material into armed conflict and armed violence situations, but not a deep analysis of explosives, the trafficking of commercial explosives or other ordnance into IED networks. And my personal background was with many years with MINUSMA. I was there for 5 years, and I was part of the Counter-IED architecture coming from the security sector reform perspective. And it was clear in the mission that there was a need to engage on a regional level to address the issue of IED usage and the materials that were flowing into the IED networks in Mali in particular. And unfortunately, in the meantime, this phenomenon has also proliferated into other countries, and we're starting to see IEDs used in a number of countries in the region, unfortunately, with mounting casualties, in particular civilians and defense and security forces, and of course, with the peacekeeping operation. So I'm going to start the presentation now, and hopefully you can all see it clearly. Is that clear for everyone? Yeah.
Yes, David, that is clear.
Thanks very much. So over the last few years, we've been able to conduct research in collaboration with the National Small Arms and Light Weapons focal points in a number of countries in the region, again, with core funding from Germany, but also additional funds from the French government more recently. And much of the research has started out focusing just on the IED dynamics, but we've also expanded into looking at the relationship between commercial explosives trafficking and the artisanal mining sectors, which is a very important part of this discussion. And as you can see, we've done this in some countries repeatedly over several iterations of research. And we have research until the end of 2022, when we're continuing to take this regional approach and support regional initiatives to focus on this problem. So let me jump right in. This is gives you a brief snapshot of how you've seen the proliferation of IED use between 2015 and the current date, more or less. We've been building up some databases to be able to graphically display this and show that expansion across the region. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a geographic expansion into Ivory Coast most recently. And we've looked at a number of different aspects of the problem and different types of components that are feeding into this problem throughout the region, including radio-controlled IED components, some ordnance, including legacy anti-vehicle mines, which are often used in IEDs in the subregion, and then the use of commercial explosives and ammonium nitrate, so some dual-use chemicals which feed into this, as well as commercial mining explosives and electronic detonators and dead cord. And the focus of the project, funded by the German government, has been really on this baseline research and analysis to try to draw some of these lessons out of the intelligence and sort of weapons intelligence spheres and into a dialogue process with states and at a regional level now, which is wonderful. And to stimulate discussion at a national level, and of course now at a regional level, based on our findings from the research. Ideally, we want to be able to support and contribute to regional strategies, information sharing and coordination mechanisms, and coordinated action ultimately by a number of different partners. I've given enough background, I think, on the German funding and the origins of the project. But again, just to say that it was initially stimulated by the rising casualties amongst peacekeepers, defense and security forces, and increasingly civilians now. We see roughly 60% of the peacekeepers in MINUSMA, to which many ECOWAS member states contribute, have been actually killed with IEDs. We have sort of done a mapping generally, globally, to look at the sources of these different components and how they feed into the system. And through country studies, through the national commissions and local researchers, we've been able to do a lot of really interesting work on understanding the dynamics of that diversion and trafficking, and that is ongoing. As I mentioned, one of the major components, part of the IED lexicon in West Africa are these Belgian low metal content anti-vehicle mines, and these are used extensively in Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger now. And they're modified to be used as part of the IED designs, and also as they were originally manufactured as anti-vehicle mines, and also they can be modified to function essentially as anti-personnel mines in some cases. We've also done comparative work between the sort of frequently sourced, the frequently referenced source for these materials, which are in Libya and Chad, where they are part of legacy systems that were transferred in the 1970s, and the ways in which they are modified and used in other parts of Africa. And we've been looking at alternative sources for these components to try to understand whether they're all still coming out of minefields and stockpiles in Libya and northern Chad, or whether there are other sources that are closer. We've also been looking at the radio-controlled IED systems, so some of the more sophisticated IEDs that are being used in the subregion, and again to try to look at design comparisons and components with other areas, in particular Libya, and other electronic components which are used in radio-controlled IED design. So doing some comparative work between the area in Mali and around Mali, and IEDs that have also been constructed in Libya and North Africa, the Middle East, and other parts of around the Lake Chad Basin, and East Africa, the Horn, and a bit into the Gulf. So we have been taking a slightly broader view to understand where there are design similarities. And we've seen some new materials coming into the system to replace systems which were trafficked through Libya and probably with connections to the Islamic State initially. But we do see that some of the networks are responding to scarcity, to new components, by adopting new components and altering their design somewhat. But overall, the design of IEDs in West Africa is fairly stable. As I was mentioning, we've done some specific comparative work between designs and components in different countries, including on some of the diversion of commercial explosives like detonators and det cord, as you can see in some of these issues, some of these images, we're able to show that the same components are used or trafficked across international borders. And through the country studies, we're able to show how not only military explosives, but how the diversion of commercial explosives from the mining sector and commercial agriculture sector are in some cases trafficked directly into the IED networks. And these country studies have been able to show us a little bit of a nuanced picture about the modalities and specific routes that this material is taking and making its way into terrorist influenced areas. In terms of general findings on commercial explosives, the most common one used is ammonium nitrate in its porous prilled form. So typically a form which is used for the commercial mining industry and is mixed with fuel oil to make ammonium nitrate fuel oil explosives, commonly known as ANFO. And there are in a number of countries initiatives that have been taken by local authorities, national authorities, customs officials, etc., to update legislation and have better controls on licensing to users, to end users. But of course, even if these are effective, we're also trying to look at second order effects. So how the different initiatives will cause a reaction by armed groups. And there are some good examples in other parts of the sub-region, including in Nigeria, about how states and how terrorist groups have responded to states' responses to their activities. And unfortunately, we continue to see this material showing up, coming from the sub-region, from the commercial mining sector in IED-related caches and armed group caches. And we've also documented the illegal manufacturing of explosives from precursors in Ghana in particular, as a hub for the mining sector, and how this can also feed into these networks. This slide is just meant to give you an overview of the sort of summary of the research conducted in the States so far, just to give you an idea of the sheer complexity of the trafficking networks and dynamics that we've been able to document during the research. And lastly, the intention here has always been to try to take this research and feed this into the processes of developing national strategies based on facts and findings, and to support the self-assessment exercises using the UNIDIR tool, which I feel is actually the ideal kind of partnership and collaboration to be able to feed baseline research into the processes, the national processes of self-assessment, so that these baseline assessments are an accurate reflection of these dynamics, and so that they can be compared across a whole subregion. On the basis of the research and some of the other work which is being done across the continent that we've been connected into, including with the African Union and more recently with IGAD, we also offer the following recommendations based on our research. Beyond the universal adoption of and use of the self-assessment tool, we would promote the development of this regional counter-IED structures and architecture, which I think is starting to now come into shape through ECOWAS's initiative. The development of regional strategies, information sharing platforms, examining some of the relationships between, let's say, conventional or security-focused IED and civilian community engagement and risk education, how that can inform counter-IED responses. Another important area would be regulatory harmonization. This is something which comes up repeatedly because some of the precursor chemicals, including ammonium nitrate, are treated differently under different legal jurisdictions. And we believe that there's a requirement to harmonize some of these jurisdictions. Just as an example, ammonium nitrate is treated as an explosive in some countries, and it's treated as a chemical in other countries. In some countries, it's only treated as an explosive or a dangerous good for the purposes of taxation and not for the purposes of transportation security or storage security. So there's clearly a need for harmonization of legislation across the region. And I think it's also extremely important that whatever is developed within the ECOWAS subregion is connected into some of the sort of fledgling initiatives, including by the African Union to develop a continental counter-IED strategy and other emerging strategy development processes, including with EGAT. So there's regional expertise and there are centers of excellence that could also help bring capacity for strategy development in the ECOWAS region. Thank you very much. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much.